Hello horror fans, SwankyBox here, and welcome back to HorrorScoped, where today we'll be taking a dip into the lore of My Friendly Neighborhood. Typically, we'd be doing more of a dive into the story and themes of a given game, but the game hasn't actually released yet. Set to go live sometime later this year, what we do have to look at with My Friendly Neighborhood is a demo that gives us a base to theorize from, as well as an overview from the developer themselves. So sit back and prepare yourself for some Muppet shenanigans and a bit of detective work, as we try to piece together what exactly is going on in My Friendly Neighborhood. When you were younger, how many TV shows did you watch that had puppets involved in some capacity? There are a few that come to mind initially from a while ago, such as Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, or even Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Perhaps you even watched Eureka's Castle. My Friendly Neighborhood channels these children's programs at its heart, and then adds a horror twist to all of it. My Friendly Neighborhood, or MFN for short, was a popular TV show meant to be a source of wholesome and educational entertainment for young children. Like some of the real-world counterparts I mentioned a moment ago, eventually, its wave of popularity began to dwindle, and eventually the show was cancelled. Until it wasn't. One night, long after the studio had shut down, and the show had faded into memory, the building suddenly began broadcasting the show once more. Well, you might ask yourself, just how might that happen? This is what the protagonist, Gordon, has arrived at the studio to find out. Gordon so far seems to be your typical grumpy handyman. From his initial interaction with the sock puppet Ricky at the beginning of the demo, it would seem that Gordon has already been at the studio for some time before the demo begins. The reason for this conclusion is that upon conversing about his attempts to get to the roof, Ricky says, "The roof? Look, you've got to give up this nonsense about the antenna." The antenna is Gordon's primary goal, which makes sense, since he wants to find out why a studio that had gone dark, presumably for years, was suddenly broadcasting once more. However, upon arriving on the premises, you would think his priorities would maybe shift. You know, because there are puppets walking around and conversing with no strings attached. It's certainly creepy walking through the basement of the studio and finding puppets standing around talking to nothing but the void. Some can be seen even repeatedly beating their heads against walls or furniture. When Pinocchio wanted to be real, I don't think this is what he had in mind. Things only get more unsettling as Gordon makes his way deeper into the basement. One particular red flag is the poster covering the studio's rules. This single piece of paper pinned to the wall would seem to indicate that things were always weird at the studio, far before the current situation. Rules such as number 2, keep quiet, which states it's hard enough to keep the neighbors quiet, or number 6, which urges employees not to swear around the neighbors because they're highly suggestible. Have these puppets always been alive from the onset? How is this possible? If you're watching this channel, then you're probably familiar with Poppy Playtime and the apparent eerie nature of its toys coming to life. If you haven't, you should definitely check out our videos on that game. I bring this up because I believe there's something similar going on with the puppets in My Friendly Neighborhood, namely the theory that these puppets may in fact be inhabited by the souls of the deceased, in particular, and unfortunately, children. A specific interest to this theory is some of the dialogue from the puppets themselves, one of whom has some very unsettling dialogue involving how it feels when bugs are biting at her toes, or the scent of burning hair. This very well could be the soul of a child describing what is currently happening to their corpse. How terribly morbid of a sensation that must be, if it is indeed the case. Just what could the master plan of the producers and studio have been? The puppets seem to be going stir-crazy in their isolation and loneliness. For all intents and purposes, it doesn't really seem like they mean to hurt Gordon when they run up to him. Really, it looks almost like an overly excited dog running up to their owner and knocking them over unintentionally. The only exception to this would be Ray, as they simply seem to be angry in general. Everything in the demo is setting up a story and experience that we're very eager to hop back into. The narrative setup is enticing, as it paints a vague picture of unfortunate events happening to both visitors to the studio and outside as well, due to the apparent and possibly related increase in violent occurrences in the city at large. I'm definitely looking forward to this release, and if we find more details in the meantime, I'll be sure to put forth some more theories about what it could all mean. Subscribe now if you enjoyed this, and until next time, horror fans, cheers!